Mary escaped the backrooms. At least, physically. But the ending quietly suggests that something else escaped too. Because the final shot of the movie shows a still-life version of Mary sitting alone in a badly replicated room, almost like the backrooms already made a copy of her before she ever got out. And once you realize what that means, the ending becomes way darker than it first seems. Welcome back to Movizo, where we break down the details movies hide in plain sight. Today we're talking about A24's Backrooms, the viral internet horror concept that somehow turned into one of the creepiest films of the year. And honestly, the reason this movie sticks with people isn't just the scares. It's the feeling that something about the ending is deeply wrong. Because Backrooms doesn't really end with answers. It ends with implications. And the more you think about them, the more disturbing they become. Throughout the movie, everybody keeps asking the same question: what exactly are the backrooms? Clark becomes obsessed with that question long before Mary enters the maze herself. He spends more and more time disappearing into this strange endless world while his real life completely falls apart around him. And once Mary enters the backrooms to search for him, she immediately understands why nobody comes back the same. The place feels wrong in a way that's hard to explain. Hallways repeat endlessly. Rooms look familiar but slightly broken. Everything feels copied instead of real. Then the movie gives us the biggest clue during the dinner table scene. Clark explains that the backrooms are everything that's ever been. That line basically explains the entire movie. The backrooms aren't just another dimension. They're an imperfect replica of reality itself. That's why Clark's furniture store exists there. That's why Mary's childhood home exists there. And that's why the creatures known as the still life look almost human, but not completely. They're copies too. And honestly, those fake human designs are some of the creepiest parts of the whole movie. What makes Clark interesting is that he's not introduced as a villain. He's just broken. At the start of the film, his marriage is collapsing, he's emotionally isolated, and the backrooms slowly become the only place where he feels understood. That's what makes his story tragic instead of purely evil. The longer Clark spends inside the backrooms, the more detached from reality he becomes. By the time Mary finally finds him, he barely feels like the same person anymore. And then comes that incredibly uncomfortable dinner scene where Clark forces Mary to roleplay as his ex-wife while the still-life creatures sit around them watching. That entire sequence feels less like horror and more like watching someone mentally collapse in real time. Then the movie suddenly turns terrifying in a completely different way. Another still life appears. But this one isn't like the others. It's a giant distorted version of Clark wearing his pirate costume, a twisted copy created by the backrooms itself. And the scariest part? Pirate Clark kills the real Clark almost immediately. Which means the copy literally replaces the original. The movie doesn't spend much time explaining this moment, but it completely changes the rules of the story. Because now we know the backrooms don't just imitate people. Sometimes the imitation survives longer than the real person. And from that point on, Mary is basically running for her life. The chase sequence is probably the most stressful part of the film. Mary keeps running deeper through endless rooms, not even knowing whether she's getting closer to escape or further lost. Eventually she finds herself back inside Clark's furniture store. For 1 second, it feels like she made it out. Then she notices tiny details are off. And you immediately realize. This is still the backrooms version. Right as Pirate Clark catches up to her, async scientists suddenly appear and pull both Mary and the creature back into the real world. Now throughout the movie, async mostly stays in the background. But by the ending, we finally understand how important they are. Phil explains that async originally manufactured MRI machines before discovering the backrooms and dedicating everything to studying them. And according to Phil, this discovery isn't just scientifically important. He believes it might be the single biggest discovery in human history. Which honestly makes async even scarier. Because they don't see the backrooms as evil. They see it as valuable. The final conversation between Mary and Phil is one of the quietest scenes in the movie. But it's also one of the most unsettling. Mary asks what's going to happen to her now. And Phil basically avoids giving her a real answer. He tells her they still haven't made a decision. A decision. That wording matters. Because nobody in Async treats Mary like a normal survivor. They treat her like someone contaminated. Like they aren't fully sure she came back alone. And then the movie hits us with the final shot. A still-life version of Mary sitting silently inside a replicated room. Already existing. Already copied. Already trapped inside the backrooms. That image completely changes the meaning of her escape. Because maybe surviving the backrooms isn't enough. Maybe once the place copies you, part of you stays there forever. My personal interpretation. I think the movie is less about monsters and more about identity. The backrooms don't just kill people. They duplicate them. Clark lost himself so completely that the copy became more permanent than the original version of him. And now the same thing might be happening to Mary. That's why the ending works so well. The movie never tells us whether still-life Mary is dangerous. She's just sitting there. Alone. And somehow that's scarier than a jump scare. Because you start asking questions the movie refuses to answer. How much of the real Mary came back? Does the copy have her memories? And if the backrooms can recreate people perfectly enough, would anyone even know the difference? The ending also quietly sets up a sequel. The real Mary's future is unknown. Still-life Mary now exists inside the backrooms. And Pirate Clark is still being examined by Async scientists in containment. So the story definitely isn't over yet. Director Sam Parsons has already confirmed that the events of the film are completely real, not a dream or hallucination. Which makes that final shot even more disturbing. Because still-life Mary isn't symbolic. She's real too. So here's the big question. Do you think the still-life version of Mary is dangerous? Or is she just another victim trapped inside the backrooms? Drop your theory below. I genuinely think this movie gets creepier the more you think about it. Backrooms doesn't just leave you scared. It leaves you questioning what actually makes someone real in the first place. And that final shot of Mary might end up being one of the most unsettling horror endings of the year. Subscribe to Movizo for more ending explained videos, hidden details, and movie breakdowns. See you in the next one.